Hey guys, I'm Val. The purpose of this build is to make it to endgame with the least amount of uniques or gear requirements. We are going to be using one unique, the Dolmen Stone, and the only other requirements would be the aspects. Optimized gear is not required to start, but obviously any upgrades will make the build better, such as better stats on your gear or certain uniques like T-Bolt's Will. I wanted to show how strong this build is by stripping it down just to aspects and the one unique requirement. It is able to do tier 100 dungeons. For the abilities, they are all the same. Trample, it's our first form of unstoppable, and it's there for movement as well. The next ability is Hurricane, it's necessary. Enemies who are damaged by Hurricane are slowed by 25%, and enemies affected by a Hurricane deal 20% less damage. This combined with Boulder and Dolmen Stone will make boulders rotate around us. We're going to use Earthen Bulwark, it's our second form of unstoppable, and it's going to add a little extra damage as well. This combined with the Spirit Boon Bolster, it's going to be one of the main sources of our Fortify. For the ultimate, we're using Petrify. This is used to nuke down bosses or elite packs. The basic, we are using Claw, and it will proc our symbiotic aspect faster and more often. And then our main ability, Boulder. I use Savage Boulder because the critical strike chance is increased by 3% each time it deals damage, which will add up quickly in dungeons. You could switch to the flat 20% for bosses. For the aspects, I'm using Mending Stone. This increases our unstoppable and our movement speed. For the chest, I'm using Symbiotic. When the Nature's Fury key passive triggers a free skill, your non-ultimate cooldowns of the opposite type are reduced by up to 5 seconds. We are using this to reduce the cooldown of Boulder and to keep Hurricane up at all times. For the gloves, I'm using the Conceited aspect. Deal up to 25% increased damage while you have a barrier, which is our Earthen Bulwark, which we increase the duration, and it's going to be spammable. So for the most part, this is just a flat damage buff. For the pants, I'm using Earth Guard. Gain up to 25% bonus amount to your next Earthen Bulwark for each enemy you crowd control, up to 100%. This is really nice to increase our survivability and to increase the uptime of our barrier. If needed, you could switch this with the armor aspects such as Juggernaut if you're not hitting the armor cap. For the boots, Ghost Walker, while unstoppable and for 4 seconds after, you gain up to 25% increased movement speed, and you can move freely through enemies. With all the buffs we're putting into our Earthen Bulwark, this will be up at most times, and this solves a lot of the movement issues. The weapon, I'm using Edge Masters. Skills deal up to 20% increased damage based on your primary resource. And since we aren't using our spirit at all, this is going to be a flat 20% increased damage buff. For the offhand, we're using Nature's Savagery. This allows Claw to act as a storm skill and to proc our other abilities. For the first ring, I'm using Crashstone Band. Her skills deal up to 40% more critical strike damage to crowd controlled enemies. And for the second ring, I'm using Natural Balance. Casting a storm skill grants your earth skills 45% increased critical strike damage for 4 seconds. Casting an earth skill increases the critical strike chance of storm skills by 12%. And for the one and only unique required for this build, we're using Dolmen Stone. The main stat that needs a good roll is the nature magic skill cooldown reduction. Everything else is a bonus. For the skill tree, our basic skill is going to be Claw. We're going to be putting 1 point into Enhanced and Wild Claw. For the core skills, I'm putting 3 points into Predatory Instinct. For the defensive skills, I'm putting 2 points into Earthen Bulwark because we need this point to progress further down the tree. 1 point Enhanced and 1 point Innate. You can move this to Preserving Earthen Bulwark, but we already have a lot of Fortify generation in this build. 3 points into Ancestral Fortitude. We need these points to move further down the tree, and this frees up points in the Paragon Board, so we don't need to go for resistances as much. And 3 points into Vigilance. You gain 15% damage reduction for 6 seconds after using a defensive skill. And since we are going to be using Earthen Bulwark so often, this should be up most of the time. This is almost a flat damage reduction buff. For the companion skills, we're not taking any. For the RAS skills, 1 point in Elemental Exposure and 3 points in Endless Tempest. This increases our Hurricane uptime and the procs of our Cataclysm, which has a 30% chance of proccing from Petrify. 1 point into Hurricane, Enhanced, and Savage Hurricane. We're going to be maxing out Boulder, then 1 point Enhanced and Savage Boulder. You can move this point if you want the flat 20% critical strike chance instead. 3 points into Crushing Earth, 3 points into Safeguard, and 3 points into Stone Guard. 1 point in Trample just for more movement and Unstoppable. For the ultimate, I'm using Petrify. And we're going to be putting 1 point into Prime Petrify, 3 points into Defiance, 3 points into Natural Disaster, and 3 points into Resonance. 3 points into Defensive Posture, 1 point into Quick Shift, and 3 points into Heightened Senses. We open up some points from not taking Iron Fur or Mending. We will no longer be switching to Werebear. This makes the build a lot more tanky with all the additional Fortify that we gain. If you wanted to, you could take all these points and just put them into Earthen Bulwark to increase the barrier amount as much as possible. And for our key passive, Nature's Fury, casting our Earth skill has a 30% chance to trigger a free storm skill of the same category and vice versa. We're using this in combination with the symbiotic aspect to reduce all our cooldowns. For the Spirit Boons, I'm using Wariness. You take 10% reduced damage from elites. 1 point into Avian Wrath, you gain 30% critical strike damage. 1 point into Bolster, Fortify for 15% of your maximum life when you use a defensive skill. 1 point into Obsidian Slam. Every 20th kill will cause your next Earth skill to overpower. This is good for dungeons, and it will proc the 12% increased damage from the Dominate glyph. Then we will be taking Calm Before the Storm. Nature magic skills have up to a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 2 seconds. For the construct, I'm using Flash of Adrenaline, Tactical Support, Duration, and Evernight. If you do not have Evernight, just replace it with Safeguard for extra damage reduction. Then I'm also using Tempest with Fortify support, Efficiency support. If you move Safeguard, you could use Arcing support. Here's some gameplay so you can see how the build performs. This is a tier 100 vault. Hope you guys enjoy. For the Paragon board, we're going to be going to the right and we're going to be taking the damage and we'll get the maximum life on the left as well. Our first glyph is going to be Outmatch. Deals 16% increased physical damage to non-elites and bosses. Outmatch will buff the resistances and the damage that we get here. The next board is going to be the Inner Beast board. The glyph's going to be Undaunted, gain up to 10% damage reduction the more Fortify you have. We're going to grab all the intelligence to increase the damage. And we're going to get the attack speed. And then we're going to go up to the next board, which is Earth and Devastation. We are grabbing the legendary node. And the glyph is going to be Earth and Sky. Nature magic skills deal 10% increased damage to crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies. This will buff the critical strike damage with Earth skills and the resistances here. We're going to go up. We're going to grab the rare node Oppress for the damage to crowd controlled enemies. The next board is going to be Ancestral Guidance. The glyph is going to be Exploit. And we'll pick up extra resistance here. And we're going to go back down to the Inner Beast board. And we're going to go out to the left to the Constricting Tendrils board. The glyph's going to be Fang and Claw. We're going to pick up the Nature magic skill damage and the maximum life here. The next board's going to be Thunderstruck. And the glyph's going to be Dominate. When you overpower an enemy, all damage they take from you is increased by 12%, 5 seconds. And we're going to get a little extra damage reduction in here as well. For the final board, we're going to go back to the Inner Beast board. We're going to go out the left side to the Height and Malice board. And the glyph we will be using here is Spirit. Critical strikes increase the damage an enemy takes from you by 2% for up to 20 seconds, up to 12%. We're going to grab all the dexterity we can here to increase the critical strike damage, which will put it at 194% critical strike damage. I'll keep the written guide up to date. If you guys have any feedback or questions, I'll answer them down below in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the support, and I'll see you guys next time.